Okay, it is 5 o'clock, so I guess we can get going. Awesome. Well, thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council, for coming tonight to our workshop. As you know, the purpose of this is to receive the official final report on the organizational assessment that was done last fall. So Mr. Sheldon Cohen with Resource Management Associates is here to present that. You all should have gotten your copies back in December when he issued that report. We did publish that as well on the website, and that's been out there as well for the public to see. And now Mr. Cohen is here to give it to you in person. So with that, Sheldon, I'll hand it over to you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chansky. Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of Resource Management Associates, we want to thank the council and the staff review panel for the opportunity to be working with you, and to thank everyone with whom we met and spoke for being very open and forthright. Okay, let's see. Okay. All right, so just as an overview in terms of the organization of the presentation, we have 5 major sections. We'll talk first about the goal, then about the approach and work plan which we took here, and then key findings and recommendations, a separate slide for each topic there. Then a discussion of next steps in terms of getting into implementation of what the assessment recommends. And with respect to questions and discussion, please feel free to speak up at any time during the presentation. If we're on a certain topic, you know, police or public works, what have you, there's no reason to sit on your question or comment. All right, so first we want to talk about the project goal, which was articulated by the city in the request for proposals which it issued. And we just quoted it here. If you look at the first 2 hyphens underneath, although this is how it was stated in the RFP, they should really be reversed, because the decisions that the council makes about service are what really drives staffing levels. We'll get into that as we go through here. So again here, future projections on staffing levels and service, recommendations for immediate and future staffing, recommendations for reorganization, and recommendations for service delivery improvements. And the challenge in a study like this is focus. In consulting, we talk about scope creep. There are a lot of things that come up that are very interesting, but that's not why you're paying us, okay? All right. So let's talk next about the approach and work plan. The point here, a few things that we'd like to say. One is our charge from the council was to be thorough in what we did. So as you can see here, there are a lot of things that we considered, a lot of steps in the process. We began, as you can see at the top, with the project organization conference, which we did with the city administrator and assistant city administrator back on October 5th. The RFP had talked about a review panel. That group is extremely important here. So the very first interview that we did when I came to town on the morning of October 16th was to meet for about an hour and a half with the staff. Those are the folks who need to actually implement whatever it is that the council may decide. They're really the owners of the assessment in that respect. And they've been very good throughout. They reviewed the draft. I met with them earlier this afternoon, and we certainly appreciate their effort. I'm not going to go through each of these items, but simply to point out that we interviewed every member of the council, we interviewed every single full-time employee, and we interviewed several other related parties. So again, the thoroughness is extremely significant here. The data analysis, police really is the one organization in the town that has the tools to generate data. That's not a criticism of anybody. Public Works is doing absolutely as much as it can do with what it has, but it has limited tools, okay? Then we talk about related things like HR, information technology, interlocal partnerships, et cetera. Let me move down to the bottom of the slide. We went through a review with the staff, got comments from the city administration, made changes in the draft. As Mr. Chansky said, we shipped out the draft on December 13th. By contract, it was due December 31st. And here we are today to do the presentation. So what really drives the assessment? The first thing is detail, and hopefully in reviewing the assessment, that came across. Just to take one example, one of the issues we raised, which we'll talk about further, is the question of staffing up in the summer with respect to the police department and the tripling of the city's population in the summertime. We went in and researched the Minnesota law. We cited specific language from Minnesota statutes regarding different options for that summer staffing. Thoroughness, we met with everybody, we looked at things, we talked with contractors, and this is really driven by facts and information. A lot of this has to do with your demographics, development in the city, and those kinds of things. So hopefully that's come across in the work product. So how do we build the assessment? If we think about how cities work, we start with policy and budget. So building the organizational assessment really begins with the role of the city council, all right? Because you are the ones who decide what the city is going to do, how you're going to pay for it, how you're going to staff it, et cetera. So that bridges us from the first set on policy and budget to the second set on services. We can't deal with staffing until we know what the assignments are, if you will, for services. What does the city want to do? Because that determines the number and qualifications of the staff that we need. And it isn't until we've addressed policy, services, and staffing that we can look at organization, which is driven by those other factors. So the question always comes up, what does an assessment involve in a local government? And the two key words here, as we have on the slide, are efficiency and effectiveness. A lot of times these get confused, but they have very specific definitions. Efficiency has to do with the application of resources to meeting a goal or objective. In local government, we have 4 resources: human resources, financial resources, physical resources, equipment, buildings, and informational resources. What do people know? Okay? Efficiency does not tell us how well the service is being delivered. Well, guess what? Effectiveness says, how well are we doing? Okay? And these two really go hand in hand, if you will. Then we say, as you've seen in the assessment, how do we decide what's important or what's most important? And the two concepts that we apply in the assessment with respect to priority are risk and impact. And risk says what adverse kinds of things might happen to the city if we don't address either a current risk or a foreseeable risk. And we'll talk about that more later in a particular context. Impact says, as you know, we sort of mentioned toward the ends of this paragraph, the old utilitarian principle. What can have the greatest good for the greatest number of people? As it turns out here in Breezy Point, our number one impact recommendation is a new computer system, what they call an enterprise resource planning or ERP system. We'll talk about that later. So that gives us the framework for the recommendations that we make to the council here. So let's talk now about the specific findings and recommendations. So the first thing is we'll sort of set the table in terms of the identity of Breezy Point as a city, because it's the identity of the organization which determines how we deal with all those other things. Basically, you're a small rural city. You have a population density of 240 persons per square mile. A typical suburb, if you were to go to the Twin Cities or the Boston area where I live, a population density would tend to run on the order of 1,000 to 2,000 per square mile. You have a very high rate of population growth, and that's really one of the overriding factors here. You are a vacation destination city. Many of the people we spoke with in October talked about the fact that on a typical summer weekend, your population goes from its current approximately 2,800 to 10,000 or to 14,000 on the 4th of July. That's huge. Having said that, it's not uncommon for destination cities in vacation areas like yourself, if you go to Cape Cod where I live, the Jersey Shore where I grew up, those kinds of things. So this is not an isolated phenomenon, but it's a critical element to who Breezy Point is. You have no distinctive human or natural features here. We've worked in cities that have mountains and valleys. You're pretty much flat, okay? You're a full-service municipality. You do public works, you do public safety, you do planning and zoning, et cetera. You have numerous intergovernmental relationships with the county, with the fire district, with the state of Minnesota, et cetera. And by statute, you're an option B statutory council manager city. So that's sort of who you are from the get-go. So now we're going to get into each of the specific areas. The first place to begin is with policy and administration. And I'm not going to read through every one of these, but pick out a few high points. What we heard from the council is that the staff does a good job for you, okay? It's interesting, too, that your website does a great job. You put out your entire council packet for this meeting, for every meeting that you do. If I'm the public in preparing for this meeting, they have the executive summary of the report, they have the full report, they have the PowerPoint with the agenda. So you've been very transparent about all those kinds of things. We are making some recommendations here about staff meetings. You're not currently doing regular staff meetings. In city government generally of any size, the staff usually meets the week before the council meeting and the week after, the morning after the council meeting. And even though you have a small, intimate organization, structure is always important in local government of any size. So you really should be having those staff meetings on a regular basis. The city administrator should be retaining all direct reports from departments. The council minutes now, again, I want to emphasize, what we say here in the assessment and in the presentations tonight is not intended to be critical of anybody or anything. It's just the way things are, okay? Your minutes are, let me say, very limited. What city council minutes should include is some narrative regarding councilperson A was in favor of X. Councilperson B was opposed to Y, okay, for the stated reasons. So there should be, as we say here, a little more meat in your minutes, because they are a very critical historical record. They are a very important part of who you are. Item 5, as we say, you're doing a great job on your website. It's very interesting. I met with the new planning and zoning administrator today. There will be a lot of changes in the roles of the city administrator, the assistant administrator, and the deputy clerk office manager, who have been doing a lot of things that the planning and zoning person will now be doing themselves, or taking the lead on at least. One of the things that came from more than one council member was that they would like the city administrator to just engage more with the business community, okay? We're recommending also that you do an annual report. Annual reports are done by cities around the country. In Massachusetts, it's required by statute, and we had some discussion with the staff earlier today referring them to some of the better annual reports for municipalities not unlike yourself. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel. A lot of things that we'll talk about here, like annual reports, like capital improvement programs, like updating of your personnel policies, these are municipal infrastructure. Okay, so we'd ask you to think of them in those terms. They're no cost. They're existing models that you can copy. Nobody will be offended. Okay, so those are things that need to be done to enhance your municipal infrastructure. Right now, police is the only one who really has the data to support their annual report, which Sergeant Garcia did for the first time last year. And the resources of the League of Minnesota Cities and your other professional organizations are extremely helpful in this respect. Okay, financial management. The overriding recommendation here is you need a new ERP system. As we mentioned in the assessment, I sat with the finance officer. Your ERP system, it's like Back to the Future. It looks like it's right out of the 80s. So we're just looking for Michael J. Fox and we'll fix everything. I was appalled, frankly. Okay. So that's number one. That will be a huge demand on all of your staff, not just Jeanette, not just David. Okay, that's going to be a citywide effort from all your departments. The review panel, as we recommend in the assessment, should continue as your user committee. An IT project cannot succeed without a user committee. You've got a great bunch of folks on that review panel. They need to work through this project, which will take you for a good 12 months. Okay? Part of the upgrade to a good system is that you'll have secure decentralized access for all your end users, limited with appropriate security to their own department, which the system knows from sign-on, et cetera, things that you may have had seen in your own experience in the business world or otherwise. Your chart of accounts needs to be revised with the assistance of your outside auditor. To give you an example, the classic model of a municipal chart of accounts, which is what you use now, is from the top down, if you will, fund, function, like public safety would be a function, department would be police, an object would be personal services, office expenses, et cetera. That gives you very little information. It gives you as a council basically almost no information except for how much did they spend. There should be at least a fifth and often a sixth dimension. The fifth dimension we recommend to use for project. So that would say, how much time did the city administrator spend on the budget? How much time did the city administrator spend preparing for council meetings? Okay, how much time did the city administrator spend on Bushman Road? Okay, and that can be done for every single employee in the town, in the city, I'm sorry. Okay, so that you can look either at an individual employee or citywide and say, how many FTEs, how much money overall, wages and benefits, did we spend related to this function, to this project? You can't do that today, okay? You should be implementing purchase order-based encumbrance accounting, which municipalities have been doing for over 100 years. You need to develop in item 5 a comprehensive CIP, and I know that's on the administrator's agenda. Again, there are lots of good models out there. Joe has started to do some of his own work on that with equipment. So that needs to be brought together for the city as a whole. With respect to filing and organization of financial records, and I don't want to get into this, you're so jammed for space now that there's no way Jeanette can do anything about it. So that would have to await whatever decision the council makes on City Hall, okay? All right, Public Works. The nature of Public Works is that as much as any other function in the city government, it's growth driven. How many more streets do you have? What do you do to expand the sewer system, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We must observe, as we did here, the staff works really well. They're very efficient, they're effective, they get the job done. people are happy in their work and all those good things. Number 3, the garage next door is at its limit. I don't know where you're going to put that next new truck, but you know, the example we sort of cited in here, I was walking around with Neil, and there was a piece of equipment on this side of the building and another piece of equipment on this side of the building, and this is from my perspective, with the door over here. Well, the piece in front of the door was dead because the battery was dead. He couldn't get the equipment that he needed around the dead vehicle out the door. Okay? Not a good idea. All right, road work should be funded as a percentage of the general fund budget. All right, so you all should be making a policy decision based on a recommendation from Joe, from David, from Jeanette about how much money makes sense for the work that you need to do on your highway maintenance. Okay? Item 5 gets back to part of our original charge. Sitting here today, the staffing in Public Works is appropriate. If other things happen over the next period of time, you upgrade your road system, you upgrade your sewer system, at some point, you may need a 4th worker. You have 3 workers plus Neil and Joe today. You may need a 4th. Quite honestly, you just have to see how that rolls out. Okay? Part of the benefit from the ERP system is that right now, Joe does all the financial stuff himself. He has no access to anything on the current ERP system. Not a good situation. Talking about IT, number 7, this came up in our interviews with several of the Public Works people. There is specialized Public Works software for things like route optimization and pavement management. They've been out there for many, many years. The route optimization grew out of school busing, actually, a long time ago. So we should be looking at what other software could enhance those functions. You're doing a good job at snow plowing. You know, we always have to be thinking about, okay, we're doing a good job, but how can we do better? Okay, I come from the land of Bill Belichick, and the question always is, you know, the end of the game, we could have done better, even if we won by 20 points. Okay? And your cost of overtime is very low. It's just a few percentage points, so folks are doing well. Police, you have a very significant risk with your summer activity. So think about it this way. God forbid something happens, and somebody calls a chief or calls David or calls one of you and says, why wasn't a police officer there? Well, let's see, your population tripled in July, but you had no other officers. You didn't address a tripling of your population and the potential demand on law enforcement. So we've laid out 3 options, okay, which can be readily explored by the city, readily discussed between the chief and David, et cetera. That should be done absolutely as soon as possible, and we recommend as strongly as we can that you get it in place before this summer. That's how much of a risk it is. Okay? Number 2 is interesting, and in some respects it's a reflection of the time, sad to say. You're in a very common situation for small municipalities, which is at 4:30 you close shop at the police department. Well, nobody's there from 4:30 until 7:30 in the morning. And stuff happens. And stuff happens after dark. There are places around the country who have built secure entries. So if someone is being actually a victim of violence or threatened with violence, they can go into the secure entry. It's on camera, real time, back to sheriff's dispatch, okay, inside and outside, and there's a place for somebody to go. The police building, asking the chief, it should be good for 10 more years. Similar to Public Works, you may need another police officer, you know, year-round at some point. You're not quite there yet, so that's another one of these things about let's see how it goes. All right? The council should be applauded for supporting the department the way you have with technology. It's extremely important. You've done a terrific job for a city of any size, and particularly a small city like yourselves. And again, the first consideration is the officer's safety. All right, you have 1 or 2 officers out at a time, spread all over town during the day, after dark, and safety is number 1. So we thank you for that and continue the good work. Again, the overtime cost in police is very, very low. So you're about 5%. The caution line is around 10%. You're doing a good job with administering that. The fire service, the formation of the fire district with Pequot Lakes has been very helpful to you. One of the main issues here is the fire engine, which is stationed next door, up the street, is now over 20 years old. When we look at fire apparatus, typically it has a lifetime of roughly 20 to 25 years. If they're being used off-road at all, that's obviously impacting the apparatus. So there should be a formal review coordinated through the chief with the board of the fire district to see what do we do about that 2003 Peterbilt. Sir?
I don't have a question for you, Sheldon, but this would be directed at David, Angel, or Rebecca. Is Chief Schwankel have this engine in his capital improvement plan, this engine 1?
Correct. So this engine should, I think the intention in the next plan, he actually, in the capital improvement plan, had discussed, they have a 1998 engine over at Pequot. It's kind of the backup engine. And he actually said he wants to replace that engine before he even replaces the backup. The only reason the 1998 doesn't come over here, it's a more reliable engine, is it's a 2-seater. So yes, that engine is the next engine up in the CIP.
Okay. Thanks, David. Item 3 on call firefighters, you're budgeted for 30, you now only have 23. To put this in context, there's really a national, I dare say, crisis with call firefighters. You just can't get them. And the main reason for that is essentially changes in society. The typical example is somebody used to live in town, work in town, they could be to the fire station in 5 minutes. Now, who knows wherever they work or what their availability is. So again, working with the fire district, you need to take a close look at recruitment and simply to say, it's not easy. It's just not easy. Okay, the new ladder truck, which I guess is being delivered this month, will help you. The other thing to say, it'll be housed over in Pequot, but going on Google Maps, it's just 8 minutes from here to there. So it's a pretty reasonable time. Okay. Again, the fire chief, as of January 1, Breezy Point is administering the financials for the fire district. He should have access to it in the same way as city department heads. And again, for the district board, just to keep track of the chief's time as it may change. Planning and zoning is interesting. Jason just started a few weeks ago. Again, this will affect what some other folks do. And item 3, we're now in this transitional period, and we've recommended that the Planning and Zoning Administrator just submit an annual report for the first year, so you as a council get to see what he's actually doing. Okay, that's very important. And then after the new administrator's been here for about a year, take a look and has a better sense of what Breezy Point is about, what the demands of the job are, look at other related information that the county or the state may have regarding land use, et cetera. All right, and then look more generally at computer-based systems, somewhat similar to the public works situation, where there is a whole host of specialized software just for planning and zoning for land use. Okay, human resources. The council did the right thing in raising compensation, et cetera, over the last few years. That's been very important. We talked earlier about the staff meetings. The personnel policy we touched on. Again, those policies are available through the LMC or other cities. Now, one of the things that's very important here is the participation of your staff in professional associations. With the cooperation of the finance officer, Jeanette was very good about, we asked for payments to professional associations for the last 3 years. That told us what your memberships actually were and what your trainings were, and what memberships you were not involved in that you should be. Okay, and again, police chief's been great. He's a member, he's an active member of the Minnesota Police Chiefs Association. He's not a member of the International Association of Chiefs of Police. Okay, so that would be money well worth spent. Joe should be a member of the American Public Works Association at the state, regional, national levels. Jason should be a member of the American Planning Association at the state, regional levels. Jeanette should be a member of the Government Finance Officers Association. These are relatively small investments that pay off hugely in saving the city money, building peer networks that you're going to learn from, and all those good things. Okay, IT and systems. We talked about getting a new ERP. The thing to emphasize in number 2 is this is a very complicated process. And first of all, you will need to identify very, very specifically what your needs are. One way to start that is to look at what your current system does not do for you, okay? This will be a very significant but very challenging process, all right? The Assistant City Administrator, Daniel has a knack for this stuff. He does a good job with it, and he should really be your point person on IT generally. And as I mentioned earlier, the review panel that was formed for the assessment here should continue as your user group. All right, so we're going to get into some summary sections now. So the previous several slides went into particular functions, okay? Now we're going to say, okay, overall, what does the picture look like? So here's the summary of staffing. Number 1, the main need in staffing is to address the summer situation with police. All right? We talked in number 2 about the possibility of adding a police officer, a public works officer at some point. You're not quite there. The data capabilities that you'll get out of the ERP, and we recommend what's sometimes called a citizen relationship management, or in business, a customer relationship management system, that will give you additional data to tell you what you're doing and how well you're doing it, et cetera. Okay, so we need to track those things and just see how it works, all right? Now you have options for meeting staffing. One option is additional part-time employees. For example, you now have 1 part-time seasonal in Public Works. Maybe you want to add a second part-time seasonal or a second year-round seasonal who works maybe 15 or 20 hours a week. Okay, so that's one of your options. Another option is contracting. You're now doing some contracting. One of the most obvious examples is with OnSystems for supporting your information technology. You're now contracting your larger road projects, okay? The DPW crew, as I recall, does, road stuff up to about 800 feet. Over 800 feet, it goes to private firms. So again, it's a matter of what fits here. Interlocal cooperation, again, through the fire district, through dispatching with the county. You're already doing some of that. The thing we have to emphasize about interlocal cooperation is the very last line here. Having a common civic culture is really the threshold issue. Do you have a history of getting along? Can you get along? You can't have, as they say, shotgun weddings in local government. It doesn't work, okay? All right, the summary of services. This is all about growth. When does it happen? What type of growth? All those kinds of things. Overall, you deliver a high quality of services. The only issue there was planning and zoning, and that was where you just had a part-time person. Now you have an experienced full-time person. That should go away, okay? We talked in number 4 about the CRM system. That will give you better data about what you're doing and how well you're doing it. And let me just say, you know, municipalities have been using CRM systems for more than 40 years. Okay, so this is not anything new. There are a bunch of them out on the market. It could be that the same vendor who provides the ERP may also have an integrated CRM module. Okay, so these are things to think about as we go along here. The summary of the organization, basically 2 lines. I mean, the first line is, the council has done very important things in the last few years. You've hired a professional city administrator, you established the assistant administrator's position and filled it with a professional, you added the planning and zoning administrator's position. If we were doing this study 3 or 4 years ago, it might be different. Okay, so now you have basically established capacity within the city organization. All right? Number 2, I mentioned earlier in passing, you really need to think about coming back in 5 years and taking another look. It's a little bit analogous to, you know, having an annual physical with your doctor. You don't need to do this in every year. You don't want to do it every year. But let's see what happens over the next 5 years. And somewhere around 2028 or 29, see what Breezy looks like. Okay? All right, summary of facilities. A few things to say here. Quite honestly, walking in here, you know, we said the city hall is disorganized and dysfunctional. As an outside person who's been to a few hundred city halls from Maine to California, that's just the way it is. I'm not taking sides on any discussion. That's just the way it is from an outside observer. All right, we mentioned earlier the Public Works garage has reached its limit and then some. Okay, it is a phase 1 priority. All right, the police department building is okay for a stretch. The sewer plant is okay for a stretch, or with other improvements that may be necessary in the meantime. Now, if the council decides to extend the sewer system, that starts to change the picture. And at that point, you sit down with Joe and David and say, okay, what do we do now about the sewer system? Or about public works staffing? Okay? And item 5 is sort of the overriding statement, which is the pace and nature of growth will likely impact facilities. What type of facility and at what point in time? All right, so we always have to talk about financial considerations, and they're very, very important here. So what we would like to suggest to the council is that there are 2 immediate significant financial investments. One is the ERP system, and the other is the Public Works garage. All right? Now, as you may have seen, in the summary of recommendations in the assessment, we identified cost and non-cost for each recommendation. I think there were 51 altogether, phase 1 and phase 2. So you can just sort of eyeball that and see what we're talking about. Now, what we have to say in terms of either of those, we like to present dollar figures when we can do that responsibly. Until we know about the particular applications that would be purchased as part of the ERP system, the user count for each application, et cetera, there's no way that you can do that. With respect to the garage, until you know the siting of the garage, okay, the features of the garage, you can't even make a wild guess, okay? So we wish we could, but we can't, quite honestly. Number 3, there are several small investments. You know, the summer staffing in police is not a big dollar item. You know, it's getting somebody in there for 12 weeks. This is commonly done, as I mentioned earlier, in other destination vacation cities like yourself. We were working with a client in Connecticut recently, and My panel was a group of officers from New York and Connecticut, senior officers, and they got to talking about the New Jersey Shore, which has a lot of small cities like yourself. Okay, you can do a telephone survey, not to throw things in Daniel's lap. You know, we can help you identify some cities down the Jersey Shore, because the officers in Connecticut were saying, oh, the Jersey Shore communities do this. They bring in people from Philadelphia, okay, just for the summer. Okay, you have a very similar kind of need. Okay, the CIP, again, is at the core of the financial considerations here. And that needs to be integrated with your operating and capital budgets. And again, the state of Minnesota, like pretty much every other state, has limitations on debt service, so forth and so on. So that's something that Mr. Chansky knows well, and he can work with you on that. And we talked earlier about the percentage funding for road work. Okay, so what are the next steps here? As we mentioned here, there are 36 priority 1 recommendations, 19 cost, 17 non-cost. Each recommendation is identified as such. The main statement that I need to make to the council is you need to rely on the staff to come to you with a workable plan. Okay? The issue you have, I always like to think of this as like a big buffet. Okay? The problem is with a staff of 18 in the city, there's only so much you can do at one time. And I said to the review panel this afternoon, even if it's only 5 or 6 items, be successful. So just pick out what you can do and do well, because the last thing you want to do is pick out an objective and not be able to meet it. Okay? So the other thing I said to David in the panel earlier is it will take the staff a few months to work through this. They're not going to come back on February 2nd or whatever with a recommendation to council. It may not be until March 30th or April 15th. But when they come back, it will be well-reasoned, okay? It'll be responsible, and it'll be doable. So those are really the key elements. Number 3, David, as the city administrator, is the project manager. One of the things we recommend is that he put together, let's say, an Excel spreadsheet. And the one I've always thought about is the one which I saw from the city of Philadelphia, and it doesn't make any difference how big you are or how big they are. They used a blue, green, yellow, red system for each project that they were undertaking. Blue meant you were ahead of schedule. Green meant you were on schedule. Yellow meant you'd fallen a little bit behind schedule. And red meant you had fallen pretty far behind schedule. Now again, somewhat like the annual report, this may be a little bit of a pain to set up once, but once it's done, the template can be used forever. Okay? So the front end needs to be there, but visual things always help. And we've recommended in the assessment that the city administrator report to you once a month about the implementation of the assessment's recommendations. Okay? Having said that, item 6, there's always low-hanging fruit. There's some things that we talked about that with Public Works this afternoon, that they can do very easily. One of the requests from police was to have dual monitors at the workstations for each of the officers. Why? Because often when an officer is doing an incident report or investigation, they can be accessing multiple databases. And it's easiest for the officer to get their work done if they can have database A on screen 1 and database B on screen 2 at the same time. Okay? So what do monitors cost? $150 or whatever? Okay? So there are the low-hanging fruit. We talked in 7, we mentioned already, and we talked about capacity. There's a large number of recommendations here, a small staff. And the most important thing is success in what you do. So then, sort of as a conclusion, we talked at the very beginning about risk and impact. Pardon me. So we did a summary of priorities. Number 1, resolve the City Hall. Number 2, deal with the ERP and related issues like the chart of accounts and encumbrance accounting. Deal with the summer staffing for police. Deal with the new public works garage. Deal with the entryway for the police station. Deal with the road funding, the CIP, the personnel policy, and council minutes. So those we would see as sort of a top 10, if you will. I know there are 11 here, but those are the ones that we would suggest that the staff and the council focus on most immediately. All right, so we'll just open the floor for any question or discussion.
I want to thank you for your work on this, by the way.
Thank you, Mayor.
Very thorough, and it's been very nice to kind of read through this and kind of see, what we've been doing right and what we need to work on. So thank you so much for flying out here and taking the time to do this.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, I would agree. It was a good report. I think the questions I have are more towards staff about implementation. Where does the council go from here? Obviously, it's going to take staff several months, but I think it should be part of a workshop and try to prioritize things. I came from the IT world. The IT we are so far behind. At the city level, the comprehensive plan calls out for an annual report every year. It's never been delivered. There's never been a public hearing on it that I remember in the last few years. So it is important to have these reports, continuous improvement plans. I think it's a lot of good recommendations.
Thank you.
IT is not glamorous either.
Yeah, the other thing I want to mention, I said to Mr. Chansky and the review panel, we like to emphasize service in our business, and as I said to them earlier, if David wants to pick up the phone and talk about something for 15 minutes, we're not going to send you a bill. That's just customer service from our point of view. So if you need a little help getting to the next steps, we're more than glad to be there for you.
Yeah, and I don't have any questions myself. This was very good to see, and I echo what Angel says about what we're doing right, what we're doing, what we could be using improvement, what we need to be eyes on the future on. The ERP system, the CRM system, that's something, a new thing that it sounds like a great investment to take public comment that way and to track it. So I'm excited to see where we go with that CRM system.
Yeah, I think it's really good. I think the feedback that you got from staff is super helpful. It brings to light a lot of things that I don't necessarily understand, nor would I know is a need for the city. So it helps bring forward some items and issues that maybe I wouldn't have considered before as priorities. So
Thank you.
thank you. Great job.
Anyone else? I would like to get your guys' opinion too on what you guys thought of the process. I do think that sometimes when we are up here, we are not as cognizant about your time. So when we're asking you guys to do things, I think it would be helpful to understand more of how much time these things take away. Like when we have these projects and just the importance of certain projects. And so again, when we push some of this on you guys, having that feedback of, well, this is the impact of that, right? And this is what's going to take away. And I think that for me would be very helpful for you guys to be able to give us that feedback as well. So I'm just curious to kind of hear you guys' thoughts on this.
Yeah, so I'll start, Madam Mayor. I think Mr. Cohen's report was, exactly what we were hoping for. Again, this is Mr. Cohen, I also even say it himself, you asked for a third party to come in here and just give you his independent thoughts. I think some of what he gave us are things that maybe we weren't even really looking at, or maybe we had kind of identified, but not a huge priority for us. He think, his recommendation, maybe it should be a higher priority for you. Or things that we'd already kind of identified. And so that was helpful. I think just kind of having that reassurance of in certain areas, like, yeah, you are going in a good direction, and identifying those things that maybe we weren't looking at as closely. As Mr. Cohen pointed out, we as a staff during the review panel, one of the things we had discussed, I brought up is, we do have as he said, we do have intention of bringing back recommendations to you, taking some time from a staff level, digging through, as he said, there are 39 phase 1 priorities, trying to figure out what is that best, what do we believe in that is that, let's start doing those today. What's that low-hanging fruit, taking into account costs and things like that, so that we can come back to you in a workshop. I think right now, I'm hoping maybe like a March or April, to come in and have that discussion, kind of present a plan, maybe that's a 2 or 3 year plan to you, have that discussion with you, and then have that kind of formally adopted essentially as our action plan, implementation plan. So that is one of the things we are planning on doing. One of the things we've actually already at the beginning of the year, talking about the meetings. Yeah, it was something, as a smaller team, we've kind of always historically just had, kind of those informal, we talk a lot amongst ourselves. But I think I agreed with Mr. Cohen. I think it's good sometime for everyone to sit down together. So we are started scheduling starting off with what I'm calling leadership team meetings. Haven't had our first one yet. We've tried to schedule it, and both times we've had illness. And I want everyone present for that first one. So health hasn't been on our side for those, but we're working on getting those implemented, and I'm excited for those as well. So I guess that's what we've got for now. Our again, biggest thing is now spending some time and really digging through and kind of, I think as Mr. Cohen put it, it might not be from a staff perspective 1 meeting, it might be 2 or 3 meetings in which we get together and we go and we start whittling that list down and figuring out, taking representatives. And just so you're clear, the review panel was specifically designed of representatives from all the departments. So just so you know, those were Sergeant Garcia, Jeanette, Deb, and Neil were the, did I get them all? Sergeant, Deb, yep. So we had pretty much police, PD, and then admin. And we kept it kind of, obviously not department heads. We wanted the worker bees involved in that. So we had it from all departments. So being able to bring them in and work with them, as well as, Joe and Brian and myself and Daniel and Peter, and go through and figure out, okay, what is in this list, the best list, make sure we're not necessarily leaving anyone out. If there's a list up here, we don't want everything to be public works. If there's something significant that PD needs as well, make sure we're balancing it across the organization as well. So we expect that, again, as I said, probably March or April. We're hoping to bring that to you.
Daniel?
Oh,
I have a question for staff, actually. I had a resident who didn't understand what this was and referred to it thinking that it was some kind of assessment on who to hire, not the recommendations. And is there a way that we can disseminate this better for the public? For example, I knew that there was a resident of Nisswa that, why did they hire a city administrator? The mayor should do that work, right? There's a lot of people that don't understand what this is, and there's so much information in here. Is there a way that we can bullet point it, right? So here's what the recommendations were from this, so that they understand more bulleted. Because if you put this whole thing out there, it's really hard to read.
Well, it's through that, Madam Mayor. So when we did, Mr. Cohen sent us the final report back in December. We gave it to you. We published it at the website. There's actually right now, Daniel created a project page for it. That's kind of where it's housed right now. And as he works on, essentially, I think what you've been working verbiage is what, transparency page kind of thing. I can't remember what you've been calling it recently. As we get the e-newsletter and the bulletin going, I think this place will probably also house it as well. But the biggest thing he gave us, and I think I provided to you as well, is you have the whole 90-page document.
Right.
There is a separate PDF that is just the 10-page executive summary. So there's that. Obviously, as he mentioned, the whole slideshow is also presented, which is kind of a bullet point. When you have a 90-page document, I'm not quite sure how you can get shorter than like 8 pages.
Is there any way that we can like put this on like a post on social media, like just the top 11 things that, like more
And-
bulleted? Is
and
there
that's
any way?
where
I'm just asking, like, I don't know for
And that's where
sure.
I think, personally, Madam Mayor, I think what I would like to see is let's get into us creating our list. Again, this is Mr. Cohen's list.
Yeah.
And then let's, we have this all on the website, and as we work through it, we'll continue to get it out there. But let's us create our list before we put out there, because then if you put this out there right now, that looks like that is the plan.
Okay.
When maybe it's not. Maybe as we as staff start to discuss it, and then we discuss it with you, maybe there's something not on this list that jumps to the high because it's that low-hanging fruit.
Okay.
Or something like
Yeah,
that.
I was just thinking
So-
of like a summary, because like I said, I was answering questions. Obviously, we put all the information out there, but people still, have their perception of what it is that,
But that's true of all our projects. I think where we fall short, and this is part of, it gets lumped into communications plan, in my opinion. There should be executive summaries for everything, Bushman Road, City Hall. People are not gonna look at 123 pages. You can't put it in 2, but 8 bullet pointed. This is what we're doing, and that's really, I think, what residents are looking for, and it's a, work and project, but it's, progress, it's everything, that we do. Any major project needs to have executive summaries, whatever you want to call it, it doesn't matter, but I think that's what residents are looking for.
Yeah, and there is, as Mr. Chansky said, we did provide the city with an executive summary that's about 10 pages, includes all the recommendations, includes a table of organization of the city. So if someone does want to see what those important issues are, they're inside that 10-page executive summary.
is there a way that maybe we can create a Facebook post that gives like a really short, I don't really know the answer. I'm just saying, like, let's just say the follow-up to this meeting, right? Like, tomorrow morning, had our, presentation on the organizational assessment. Here are the highlights. Click below to read the executive summary. Like, just something that directs people a little bit more and like a follow-up. And again, I'm just throwing out ideas so that, it,
And maybe, I don't know how it's in there now, but if you could pull out like the summary into its own PDF?
It is.
Oh, it is,
So if
okay.
you were to go down to
So that should be
that project
help-
page, there's one link that's the executive summary, and then one that's the full report.
yeah,
Okay.
I meant like a follow-up, right? Hey, last night we had our meeting. Here are the highlights. Here's the link. Go here. Something
we can work
simple,
on
I
something.
guess.
I think also the moving, as the council approved 2 weeks ago, of doing the e-newsletter, the monthly e-newsletter and the bulletin. I think that'll also help because we'll be able to expect a lot of that kind of stuff. We'll also be able to hit that in there on a monthly basis. And again, that's going to be essentially kind of how the Breezy Brief is now. It's very bullet pointed. Here are the items. So I think that'll help people as well. I know Daniel's very strategic about his social media posts because playing the algorithm of, not having too many posts at a time because then things get buried. But yeah, we can definitely look at how do we better get this information.
And I
out.
only say this because I want people to understand how important both of your jobs are, right? Because I have heard things that, have been, oh, well, why do we have an assistant? And I want people to understand what it is that you guys do and how important it is to have staff and how important it is to pay our people and to have a good public works department and to have a good police department. I mean, I think that is so critical, but yet I've heard so many comments about it being critical that we have, that we're hiring these people or that we're, increasing pay. And I think there's such an importance of understanding, like, no, we need an assistant, we need assistant city administrator. We need these things, and here's why. And I think that that's more so the reasoning for why I'm, pushing that out there. Because I think this does outline, again, like how critical it is that we do these things and we have the staff that we have.
Is the executive summary, that's this separate PDF document, is that what's in our packet?
Yes, that's already been posted on the city website.
Yep, so the first, 10 pages is the executive summary.
Yeah.
So when Mr. Cohen provided it to us, he provided 2 PDFs, the full document, and then just the executive summary. So they're both on the website. As well as the presentation itself is in the packet, and we can, after Daniel and I had already discussed, after this meeting, we then cut out the presentation and put that on that page as well. So the presentation is a standalone document as well.
Thank you. Thank you
Yes.
again.
Thank
Yep,
you so
thank you.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for braving the cold.
Well, Madam Mayor, Council, unless you have anything else you'd like to discuss regarding this issue, this is pretty much what we had for you this evening.
We're an hour ahead of schedule. That's,
There you go.
Right on time.
And again,
We get 3 hours back.
and again, as Mr. Cohen said, if following this you have any questions or anything, just let me know and we'll get you in touch. And always more than welcome to answer anything you might have.
all right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.